Mental health in the federal workforce. What can I do? Hi, I'm Anupa Iyer-Givargis, and I want to welcome you to this important program, Mental Health in the Federal Workforce. What can I do? We in the federal government are committed to fostering supportive, equitable, inclusive, and accessible workplaces for all workers, including those with disabilities, whether those disabilities are visible or not. This, of course, includes people with mental health conditions, people like me. Indeed, every day, people with mental health conditions work in all sorts of positions in federal workplaces across the country, and in fact, the world. Ensuring a mental health-friendly work environment is more important than ever, and by modeling good practices, federal agencies can help promote supportive workplaces for people in all sectors all across America. In the federal workforce, we show our commitment to fostering mental health-friendly workplaces in a number of ways. For instance, we work to raise awareness by educating employees and managers about mental health conditions and by working to reduce stigma. We also ensure workplace accommodations and other supports are provided to enable people with mental health conditions to perform their best. And then there's employee assistance, which most agencies offer through employee assistance programs, or EAPs. And very importantly, we provide access to behavioral mental health and substance abuse treatment through our employee health plans. In this video, we're going to take a deeper dive into some of these tools and talk about the roles that all of us across the federal government can play in promoting a mental health-friendly workplace, whatever our position, because it's up to all of us. Mental health and the federal workforce. What can managers and supervisors do? If you're in the role of a manager or supervisor, there's a lot you can do to foster a mental health-friendly workplace for yourself and for others. Let's take a closer look at some of those promising practices.
I'm Lou Orslien. I work for the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor.
My name is Allison Sutton-Levy, and I work for the U.S. Access Board. People with mental health conditions are eligible for reasonable accommodations. It's important that we ensure that all people, regardless of whether or not their disabilities are obvious, have reasonable accommodations that allow them to perform their essential job functions, just as anyone else can. A reasonable accommodation is a modification to any policy or the way in which a job is done. It could be an addition of assistive technologies that will allow a person to perform their essential job functions, or it could be a modification of a policy such as leave or perhaps teleworking as a reasonable accommodation when perhaps that's not an option available to other employees. It's really an option, flexibilities that allow a person to do their job.
Some of the things that we think of most often in terms of accommodation is workplace flexibility, which means changing someone's schedule. So for instance, if someone has a mental health condition and they have a medication change, then we can change their schedule after their medication change till they adapt to that medication.
So if there's a 9-to-5 job, and generally people are required to be in the office during a specific period of time, and a person needs to attend some kind of mental health counseling or support or even a medical appointment, they may ask for reasonable accommodations to alter the work schedule to help accommodate their mental health condition. That's just one example.
Accommodations contribute to a mentally healthy workplace because they provide the supports that employees need in order to be productive and do their best in the workplace. All people with mental health conditions do not necessarily need accommodations, and some people need them just periodically. It's important when someone discloses a mental health condition that you really don't diagnose someone. That's not the role of a manager or supervisor. The role of a manager or supervisor is really to listen to that person, understand if it's stress or if it is related to perhaps a mental health condition, and then provide the resources and referrals for them.
Besides reasonable accommodations, managers can refer employees to the Employee Assistance Program. It's a great free resource to all employees. It includes a toll-free number, and depending on the agency, there may even be a counselor on site to assist them. And employees can receive, in general, a whole series of free counseling sessions. It may be managed remotely or in person, depending on the person's preferences and geographic location.
This is a really important topic for managers and supervisors to understand, because they're in the position of reducing stigma in the workplace. And if we really want to create mentally healthy workplaces, then reducing stigma is the first thing that we need to address.
I think people have been stressed in ways we never really imagined before. The whole transition from in-person work to full-time telework, and now more of a transition back to hybrid work. I think managers need to be in tune that the changes are very stressful for everyone. And the way we communicate in person is different than how we communicate online. And I think if we give people the time and the space to be a little more open about the challenges they're experiencing with mental health conditions, we're going to have a lot more understanding and a smoother transition as we figure out our next steps in the federal workspace.
Mental health in the federal workforce. What can coworkers do? This next section of our video explores what all of us can do as colleagues and coworkers to help promote a mental health-friendly work culture.
I'm Natalie Vini with the Office of Personnel Management.
My name is Oli Cantos, and I am with the U.S. Department of Education. There's a spirit that's involved here with regard to how to accommodate people with mental health conditions, and it essentially surrounds the need for all of us to have the philosophy that regardless of what disability we may have, or whether someone even has a disability or not, that we are all here for one another in a spirit of team partnership to support one another the way any of us should.
As a coworker, if a colleague shares that they're going through a mental health situation or having difficulty performing in the workplace, there are lots of things to do. Be collaborative, listen, start with listening, and then share the resources that your organization has that can support them as they navigate how to deal with these new or sometimes pre-existing or long-term conditions in the workplace, in the present workplace, which is a lot different than what we've been going through over time. Being a supportive coworker is a part of an inclusive work environment. And psychological safety in the workplace is important. But you're not a doctor. You don't know what their condition is or how to treat it, but you do know if it's affecting their performance as a teammate.
Coworkers should not act as a therapist when someone discloses a mental health condition. It's important also that any information that's shared by the coworker is confidential and should be kept that way.
That person is taking you into their confidence for support and assistance, and all of that is key for an inclusive workplace culture, key to employees supporting one another. Share the resources that are available, employee assistance programs, there's employee resource groups. Agencies have lots of resources to help individuals as we all go through our workday.
For all of us as coworkers, whenever we find that a person has a mental health condition, however way we learn about it, it's important for us to show support for that individual by offering to be of help in whatever way they can, but without stigmatizing the person by making assumptions that the mere existence of a mental health condition necessarily means that a person will behave or act in a certain way. So it is important for coworkers, in the same way that it is for employers, to work with people individually and to see how they can be of support generally. Because whether a person has a mental health condition, it's still important for colleagues just to be there for one another.
Coworkers have a significant role in ensuring that the workplace is mentally healthy. And part of that role really is the destigmatization of mental health conditions.
Everyone can think about their word choices, right? So inclusive language, words matter. We have to be careful about the words that we choose. Coworkers should be mindful that individuals who experience mental health conditions or issues may also have cultural sensitivities around the topic itself. There are different practices in how people talk about mental health conditions or the resources and access that people may or may not have when it comes to health inequities around mental health conditions. And so be mindful that the knowledge that you have may not be the knowledge that they have. The comfortability that you have in sharing, that person may not have that experience. The support that you may have at home or in your family or from your community may not be the support that individual has.
So when overlaid with how somebody has a mental health condition, it's important to keep in mind how people with mental health conditions also have the intersectional reality of other characteristics that make up who they are.
So each of us have mental health, and each of us can have a mental health condition. So it's really important that we take care of ourselves. So again, knowing the resources that are out there and using those resources to take care of ourselves, it's all part of creating a mentally healthy workplace.
For people with mental health conditions themselves, this is a real important thing to remember, that in a spirit of self-determination, they are the ones to decide how to move forward and what is best for them based on the circumstances at the time.
Mental health and the federal workforce. What can people with mental health conditions do? We've talked a lot about helping others, but it's also important that we feel empowered to advocate for ourselves. That's because we all have mental health needs, whether you have a formal diagnosis like I do, or if you're someone facing new challenges. Here are some insights on disclosure, accommodations, and asking for what we need to perform our best at work.
I am Dexter Brooks with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. People with mental health conditions have a role in establishing a work environment that's mental health friendly. And the reason for that is the workplace itself needs to have diverse voices to be fully functional for everyone. So for folks who are dealing with mental health conditions, just like anyone who's dealing with any life circumstance that needs to be a part of an employment environment, really sharing that information strengthens the workforce in a way in which you have the necessary knowledge as a manager or supervisor, as a coworker, to really facilitate what's needed for everyone to be productive.
So for employees who are experiencing mental health conditions, in the workplace, it's really important for you to ask for what you need. Federal agencies are required to provide reasonable accommodations. It's really a great option for ensuring that all employees have equal access in the workplace and can be productive in their roles, despite any limitations they may have.
It's the employee's responsibility to request the accommodation, and then it's the supervisor's responsibility to respond to that request for accommodation, and then for both of them to engage in the interactive process. You really don't need to specify the condition that you have. You just really need to talk to that supervisor about the challenges that you're having at work, and perhaps some solutions to those challenges.
When you request a reasonable accommodation, it doesn't have to be in writing. It can be verbal. You don't have to use any magic words such as reasonable accommodation. You can just state to your supervisor that I'm having some difficulty doing X, which is usually an essential job function, a function or a job responsibility that is important and core to your job. You should probably refer also to your agency's specific reasonable accommodation policy and procedures, because that gives you the roadmap for following through with what you need to do as an employee by potentially providing medical documentation. We know that mental health conditions are non-obvious. It's not like having a missing limb or using a white cane or relying on an interpreter. You need to provide a little more information so other people can understand more about what your needs are and how they can support you.
Federal agencies, as part of the reasonable accommodation process, can request medical documentation to support your request. That documentation, once submitted by the individual, is to be kept confidential, separate from personnel files, as part of the process singularly. It's not to be used in any other way, in any other personnel process.
Federal employees are invited when they're onboarded to provide information about their mental health condition and disabilities at large. So during the onboarding process, as their human capital folks are bringing them in and having them sign various forms for benefits, health, they get certain demographic forms. And one of the key forms is FF's 256, which employees are then asked to voluntarily disclose their disabilities, whether it be physical or mental. But throughout employment, employees have the opportunity to modify, because one of the things that we know about disability is not stagnant. that there are different times in a person's life that they may encounter different situations. So employees have the opportunity to go in at any time to update their self-identification and provide new information or expansive information. Self-identification information gained from federal employees is kept confidential. It's kept and used in an aggregate format so the government can actually do some assessment of what are the different populations of individuals with disabilities and the types of services we need to provide them.
Federal agencies have an affirmative responsibility to know who's in our workplace, to make sure that we are providing the resources and budget and allocating those resources and budget to employ individuals with disabilities. So it's really important that employees participate in voluntary self-identification to make sure that agencies can make the right commitments and choices in ensuring an inclusive culture.
Another thing that is important is that if people with mental health disabilities choose to self-identify, they may come together with fellow people with disabilities through what are called employee resource groups, or ERGs, that are organized in different agencies across the federal government. And the great thing about ERGs is that they provide a sense of support and facilitate an opportunity for people with different types of disabilities to exchange information and ideas regarding how best to operate in the workplace. It also adds a sense of camaraderie because we, as people with disabilities, more generally speaking, have a history of promoting our own ideas and our own sense of self-determination. And part of that self-determination also involves organizing among ourselves, including in the federal workplace.
As a federal agency, it's really important for us to make sure that we have representation of various people, including those with disabilities. It's really important for our workforce to reflect the people we work for, and that's the American public.
We hope this video has provided some helpful guidance on ways to promote a mental health-friendly federal workplace. Remember, there are numerous places that can help you raise awareness, combat stigma, and seek mental health assistance for yourself or others. These include your own agency's Employee Assistance Program, the Job Accommodation Network, which you can find online at askjan.org. That's askjan.org. The Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability Inclusion, which you can find at askearn.org. That's askearn.org. And the Campaign for Disability Employment, whose website is whatcanyoudocampaign.org. That website features links to a number of workplace mental health resources and awareness building tools. Most importantly, if you or someone you know is in crisis, free and confidential 24-hour support is available through the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Simply call or text 988. Thanks for being a partner in our pursuit of a mental health-friendly federal workforce, because we all have a role to play.